Hi YouTube, this is Mike with Dark Wizard Gaming.
Hi guys!
And this is Karen. She's going to be helping us with the Learn to Play 9th Age video series.
Yeah, I think this will be a great series for everybody, for people who are like me. I have personally never read a single book out of all the years I've played.
Not even your Army books?
Nothing, not a single one. And I've learned everything from him and our other players in our group, so they've taught me everything. So Mike's basically gonna teach you guys how they taught me how to play without reading a book.
Absolutely, and so this is going to be geared towards the more beginner player who doesn't really know how the rules work completely. Mm-hmm. Anybody that's an old hat and has been playing for a while, you'll know a lot of what we're saying, but I think everybody will pick up a little bit of something as we go through all the rules.
Absolutely.
But we're going to start from the very beginning with even the basics of, what you need to play, the dice, and then we're going to go through each one of the phases on how we do the movement and the magic and the shooting and all those good things. Then we're going to go through some special rules. At the end, I'm going to actually go over and show you how to build a list, and then Karen and I are going to play a small sample battle. And instead of our normal battle reports, we're going to do it where it'll be video live, so you'll be able to see everything that we do instead of just the little snapshots. Pressure's going to be on for that one. So I really hope you enjoy this. Now, if you're not familiar with what 9th Age is, it's a community-based fantasy, more rank and file style game. It's going to be based off of dice. So all of your movements, whether it's charging or you're shooting, magic, those things are all going to be off of 6-sided dice normally. And you have everything from the small, normal, like little warriors to bowmen. You have knights, wizards, dragons. Yeah, you love your monsters.
Artillery, lots of artillery.
Lots of artillery.
My favorite too.
So there's a little bit for everything. It's really going to be based in that old, more medieval, setting, and we think it's a lot of fun. We've been doing this since 2007, and we're very excited to see where the whole project's got to this point. And now that the rules are solid with the Gold Edition, that's why we're doing the video now. I will say that if they do change the rules a little bit in the future, we won't be updating these videos because YouTube doesn't let us update them. So some of the stuff you might see will slightly change or be updated, but for the most part, all the basics are still going to be there.
And also remember, this is a game for big kids, little kids, all ages. So don't feel like you have to be an adult to learn this game, because in our group, there's all different ages. So it really is, I feel like, a kid's game.
Absolutely. So we're really excited to show you how to play 9th Age, and I hope you stay with us through the whole video series.
Have fun.
All right, bye. So in this first video, I'm going to go over the different armies that you can look at playing during the 9th Age, just a quick overview of them. We're going to talk about the gaming aids and things that can help you with your games. We're also going to just go over the dice and proper dice etiquette, as well as some general terms. All right, so we're going to have some full army overviews after the Learn to Play videos are done. But what I want to do now is just give you a quick overview of the armies that you can play. So there's going to be 16 different armies to choose from, and that includes everything from elves and men and dwarfs to undead. You'll have beasts, you'll have supernatural armies. And so just to break them down real quick, we're going to have the highborn elves, which are going to be the good elves. We're going to have the dread elves, which are more the evil elves, and the sylvan elves, which that's going to be more like the tree elves, and you're actually going to have tree men in there. Then you're going to have Empire, which is your typical man, and that's going to be kind of a jack-of-all-trades army. Kingdom of Equitaine, that's going to be your knights. So think of the damsels and the heroic knights, and a lot of mounted, even though they do have people on foot. Your ogre khans are going to be your great big men. You'll have warriors of the dark gods, and with them, they're going to have some monsters. They're going to have some men, a little bit of everything. Beast herds, and then we're going to have the always crazy orcs and goblins. Saurian ancients are going to be your lizard men. You'll have your regular dwarven holds, and then you also have your infernal dwarfs, which more of your chaos evil dwarfs. We're going to have vampire covenant. And then we'll also have Undying Dynasties, which you can think of the Undying Dynasties as the undead, but only in an Egyptian setting. There's going to be Demon Legions. And then there's also the Vermin Swarm, which are going to be the rats. Now, there may be additional armies in the future. And again, if they update those, that's something that we can always add another video for. But these are the core 16 armies that we start with. All right, so before we get into looking at units and how everything works with movement and shooting and magic, close combat, all those different things, I want to talk about just some of the basics that you may want to get just to get some games going. Now, everything that you're going to see here on this table is not everything you're really going to need to play a game. This is a lot of stuff, and I don't want to overwhelm you because as a beginner, really all you're going to need is just some dice, tape measure, and really just a couple of magic cards. But this is something that'll show you what you can get and things that can make your games a lot easier. And I've been doing this for a long time, and I've collected stuff over the years, so don't feel like you have to have all of this, but it is something that you might say, hey, that seems like that would be a really good item for me to have. So I want to show you all the options that we have for the gaming aids that can really help you. So we're going to have everything from, the dice, tape measure, all of your line of sight tools, your unit spacers, laser. I have different types of veil tokens, wound markers. I'm going to have a lot of other markers throughout. I'll also have things like the veil cards, spell cards. We'll have dry erase markers and protector sheets to mark all of our spells. We'll have other unit markers so I can mark all of my units. And I'll go through each one of these one by one and show you more what they do. All right, so I want to go over a few of the gaming aids that I was talking about earlier. So as we start here closest to me, we're going to have all of the dice boxes. And again, I have one for each one of our colors of dice. That's not something that you really need to have. When we get over here to the dice, what I'm going to like to see normally is about 30 dice of any one color, anywhere from 30 to 40, so I can roll all my dice at once. And then I'm going to have some additional colors for my character, so if I roll something that's hitting better or worse, I've got those and I can roll it again all at once. So these are going to be what I would use for my veil tokens for this one. When we come over to the purple, I've got one where I've just got an 8-sided dice to use my veil tokens there. And as you go through, it's all pretty much the same thing. Sometimes people will use smaller dice for wounds. Sometimes they'll use them for veil tokens, so there's a lot of things you can do differently there. When we get over to here, these are going to be a lot of our stuff, like for example, this is a line of sight marker, so you can put this and you can see where your models can see. These are great because they're unit markers. You can put them in the corner of your unit and mark them. This is also a unit marker, so you can mark the corner, but this will work as a line of sight because right off the edge of it you can see. And I'll show you how all of these work in a lot more detail when we are doing all of our demos. I have some deployment ones here. This one's great because it's going to have 1 inch, 2 inches, and 1/2 inch, which is everything that you're going to need for all of your different measurements. So I like to use that one quite a bit. And this bigger one's going to be the same thing, only with extra. So you're going to have your 1/2 inch, your inch, your 2 inch, and then you've even got a 5 inch. These are one of the funnest things you're going to use, which are lasers. And so if you're using this line of sight, what you can do is you can set this up against your unit, and then you can go like this, and that's going to show you what you can see for your line of sight. I use the charge markers and the retreat markers quite a bit. I really like these because anytime I'm charging, I'll just put that out there, or if my unit's fleeing, I'll go ahead and put this as a retreat, and it makes it nice. I remember that they are fleeing. I need to go ahead and rally them. Over here, we're going to have the wound markers. A lot of people will do this differently. Some will use the dice like this. I like to use the little blood drops. Companies make different ones for this, but if you just want some way that you can go ahead and mark your wounds, and it depends on, unless you have a lot of big monsters, 1 through 6 is normally enough there. And then these are the same things that we had over there, just with a different color. And then we'll always have our different tape measures. So in the future, they're probably going to have rule books printed. I've done this just with our local office store, and then we had it bound. But it's nice to have a printed copy. You can use everything with your PDFs online. We also have all of the, the different Army books that we went ahead and printed up and just have them bound as well. What I would recommend is, if you don't want to print up all these, is just print up the book that's going to be your specific Army book, and then have the rule book either on PDF form or a printed version of it. And the next thing that I think is a really good thing to have is going to be your printed cards. So these are going to be our veil cards. So we can just draw those, and so we've got the blue and the pink version. And then I have all of the different spell cards. So if we're going to be looking at alchemy, I can go ahead and pull out any of those that I need. With all of these spell cards, it's nice if you have at least the spell cards that you're going to be using. And if you don't want to use these, you can also just go ahead and even just make notes on it. But you want to be able to, if you're casting a spell, put that down right next to your unit. That'll help you and your opponents remember that you have it. it. And the last thing I want to show you is what I typically do is I have all the spells printed out and then I put them in one of these sheet protectors. And what's great about that is you can take either a dry or a wet erase marker and you can mark which spells you have. You can also mark which spells your opponent has. And then when you're done, you can just erase them off. But it's a lot easier than trying to pull out all the cards and always just have the cards. So I really like using these with the sheets as well. All right, so we're going to start with the dice first because this whole game is based around dice rolling. So we typically use a 6-sided dice, which would mean you're going to have 1 through 6 on the dice. Now with these, what we're going to do is if you need to hit on, say, a 4, which is going to be average. So 1, 2, 3 would be a miss, and then 4, 5, 6 would be a hit. And that's where we base everything off of is, as a 50-50 odds of hitting on a 4 up. And then some things roll better, some things roll worse. But if you need to hit on a 4, what we'll say is we need a 4. And so what that would mean is everything in here that is a 4 or better is going to hit. So anything that would be less than a 4 would be a miss. So you would see, like, if we've got some 2s in here, we'd go ahead and pull those out. This roll is actually done pretty well. But that's the general concept when you're rolling a d6. You might hear people say, I need anything but, which would mean 1s, because 1s always fail, and in most cases 6s always succeed. There might be some times where you'll have to roll a 6 and then another number for it to actually succeed. But in most of our rolling, no matter how good you are, if you roll a 1, the dice just didn't like you, and for that specific hit or whatever you were rolling for, it didn't work. And no matter how small your model is compared to a huge monster that you're attacking, if you roll a 6, he got lucky and he stabbed through the scales or whatever it was and actually made a hit. Now when you're rolling, what I like to do is count out all the dice I need and roll them all at the same time. So what I'm going to do here is, let's just get these out of here. And let's say that I'm going to need 10 dice. So I'll go ahead and count out my 10 dice. And then what I like to do is just go ahead and roll all 10 at the same time. And then I'm going to go ahead and pick out my misses. So on this, if we needed 4s or better, we just go ahead and pull out everything that's not a 4. So with that, we actually rolled a little bit above average because we got 6 hits and we had 4 misses. Now the one thing that I want to point out, dice etiquette, it's always better to pull out your misses instead of your hits, because if you pull out your hits, then the other person didn't get a chance to actually see which ones hit, and especially if you pull them out really quickly. So what I like to do is leave everything that was successful in the tray, pull out the others. The other thing, I'm using a dice tray right now to roll with, and as you saw earlier, I have a lot of dice trays and they all match my dices, for different colors. I really like using some sort of dice tray. For one, it's going to cut down on your cock dice, and a cock dice would be something like this. So if I can get this to line up here, I'm using my bone dice because I really like these, but these are kind of harder to line up cocked. But you can see that 2 is now cocked, so you have to re-roll it. When you're playing on the battlefield and you have terrain and you're going to have all of your units and all these things in the way, all of your gaming aids, you'll end up with a lot of cocked dice if you don't roll in a dice one. So that's just one thing I like to do is roll in here. Now what our typical rule is if you can put a dice on top of it and it'll stay, then it's not cocked. That one is obviously cocked, so you would re-roll it. So we'd do that. The other thing is by using a dice tray, it's going to keep your dice from hitting your models and your opponent's models. And if your opponents are, one of those people that really like to throw dice and have them skip across the board, it's also nice sometimes if you just offer for them to use your dice tray, because that's going to save them from hitting your models. Because it can be frustrating when someone's rolling bigger dice and they throw it at your models. So when we're talking about rolling multiple dice, one of the other things that I like to do is if I have hits, they're going to hit better. So say for example, I'm throwing the 10 dice I threw earlier and they all needed 4s, but I've got a hero in there that's going to hit on a 2. So what I like to do is use a different colored dice. So I just go ahead and throw, say, this black one, which you may not be able to see it there, but that was a 3. So because it was a 3 and he was a hero that hit better, that one actually hit. So if the hero has 4 dice that he's throwing maybe for some certain bow, and then all the other shooting needed, 5s even, then again you can roll and you can just pick out the different colors according to which one you rolled. Now when we're talking about dice, one of the other things I want to point out is Some dice are going to have specific images for either the 1 or the 6. So for example, this is my vampire dice. I use my bone dice for my vampires and my Undying Dynasties. And you can see that this one is going to have a fang for when it hits. And that's a 6. And then you're going to have a 1 for the other. There's going to be other dice where occasionally you'll see a 6 for when you hit, but you're going to see a dragon here for when you miss. I really like to keep all of my dice, if I'm going to roll something with images, the same. So for example, for my my Undying Dynasties, the 6 hits and the 1 doesn't with that bone. So you don't have to use one or the other for all of your dice. If you have dice that all the images are on 1s or all the images on 6, that's what I recommend. And you can change it up, depends on which dice that you're using. But what I don't like to do is when opponents have some dice that the image is on the 6 and some dice the image is on the 1, and they're rolling those in the same game, it gets really confusing because then I have to ask them to show me, was that a 1 or was that a 6? And then you never know if they're actually picking up the wrong dice. So if you do get images, my one suggestion would be to you is whatever images you have during that game, were the images on 1s or were the images on 6s, and don't mix and match them with both. Sometimes we're going to modify dice rolls. So what we might say is we're adding or subtracting a number. So we might say that there's going to be a d6 plus 1. For example, if this was a 2, that would go to a 3. There's times that we're going to say you need to roll 3d6. So in that case, to figure out the number of hits, we'd come in here and we'd grab 3 dice and we go 3d6. That was a really good roll. We ended up with 14 on 3d6. There will be times where they'll say 2d6 times 2. In that case, if we were going to roll, and you'll see a lot of shooting like that, so that was a 7, which is going to be our average number for 2 dice. So we had, that's the 2d6, which is 7, and then times 2, 14. So in that case, we might get 14 shots with that particular war machine. Sometimes you'll hear natural roll on a d6, and what that's going to mean is if you have a natural 1, or say a natural 6, and it may trigger something. If this was a 1 and this was a 6, depends on your specific things that you're doing. The 6 might trigger an extra benefit like battle focus, which would get an extra hit. Or the 1 might trigger something where you're going to take a toxic hit if you're, say, vermin swarm on yourself. Now, sometimes you get to re-roll the dice. So if it says you can re-roll fail to wounds, or say you get an Aegis save, but you have to re-roll the Aegis save, which would be divine attacks, which we'll get into later. Things like that, when you do that, you're just going to take the dice that was supposed to be re-rolled and you re-roll it. Now, one thing I want to point out is it's a final modifier on the second result. So no matter what the case, you cannot re-roll dice more than once. So if I have to re-roll all my 1s, I'm going to re-roll that 1, and that's a 5. Even if it was a 1 again and I say re-roll all my 1s, I would only get to re-roll that the 1 time for the 5. So sometimes you need to roll a d3, and when you do that, you're going to roll, and a 1 and a 2 is going to be a 1 result. If you roll a 3 or a 4, that's going to be your 2 result. And if you roll a 5 or a 6, then that's going to be your 3 result. And sometimes the natural 1 or natural 6 is still going to apply. So if you roll the 1 or the 6, if you roll a 6, it's still a 3, but you might have additional benefit if you rolled a natural 6 on there. All right, you're going to see maximized and minimized rolls. And what that means is you're going to roll an extra dice, and if it's maximized, you're going to take the highest 2. If it's minimized, you're going to take the lowest 2. So for example, on a charge, if you get maximized rolls on a charge, you're going to roll 3 dice, and you're going to take the highest 2. So we end up with a 8 out of that instead of a 5. Now there's going to be some tests with leadership where you're actually punished because your guys are a little bit battle hungry and they want to run in and charge even when maybe you don't want them to, and that would be done on a maximized roll, so that would be on an 8. There's also some leadership tests where you're saying that your guys are very controlled and you can count on them to do what they're supposed to do, so in that case you would do the minimized roll, so that would go back down to a 5. Now we do have dice direction. There's a couple of options you can do here. So we have the dice where, just so you know, the 1 and the 6 is always going to be on opposite sides. And what happens with this, with all dice, is whatever is on the opposite side is always going to add up to 7. And so if you take the 1, wherever that is facing, then that would be your angle. So if we set this like this, and you can see the 1 right there, then that would be that you're going in this direction. Now we also have a direction dice. So this is going to have an arrow on it on most sides. And then this is the old hit dice. So if you had the hit dice and that also rolled a hit, you can see that right here there's going to be a darker line. So that would show the direction you're going with the darker line pointing that direction. So if I roll this one, then we have actually rolled the exact same. So the 1 is here, so it's going this way, and that one is going that way. The one thing I would say is when you are rolling dice for a direction, if for any reason you need that, try to roll it close to whatever you need for the direction. Because if you roll it right in front of your board edge and it's clear on the other side of the board, it's much tougher to figure out the correct direction. And sometimes that extra inch of how you would move over a foot is going to make a big difference on what you hit or what you don't hit. So I always like to roll that right next to whatever I'm rolling. Alright, so for general principles, the first thing we're going to talk about is turns. So with 9th Age, you're going to have 6 game turns, which is then divided into player turns. So each turn, one player will get all of their turns, and then the next player will get all their turns, and that's a game turn. At the beginning of the game, one player has the first turn, and that's where they're going to go through and do all of their phases. It's going to be the charge phase, movement phase, magic phase, shooting phase, and then combat phase. And then it'll be the next player's turn. When they finish their phases, then that's going to be all of turn 1. We're going to go through for this full 6 turns, unless something happens where one player gives up or all of their models are removed from the game because they were killed. So like I said before, going down to the player turn, you're going to have charge phase, movement phase, magic phase, shooting phase, and then melee or combat phase. And we'll get into those much later on all the details of each one of those phases. So another term we want to talk about is active and reactive players. So the active player is the players whose player turn it currently is. So if it's my turn, I'm doing all my stuff, then if something happens that requires the active player to make a decision first, that would be me. If I'm on the other side and the other opponent's doing things, then they're going to be the active player and I would be the reactive player. And you will see some certain things with effects that it will make a difference. So just like I was saying there, whenever 2 or more effects occur at the same time, you always resolve effects controlled by the active player first. And then if there's a choice involved, such as abilities that I could choose to activate or maybe I'm not going to activate, the active player must declare the use of their abilities first, and then the reactive player does theirs. Each player can decide in which order they resolve all of their specific abilities. And we don't have this happen a lot, but there might be some things where there's 3 different abilities and they may need to activate them in a certain order for it to make sense for them. And then once both players have declared how to use the order of their abilities, they resolve their effects, starting with those of the active player. Before the game starts, if you're in the pre-game sequence and whoever picks their deployment zone, then that's going to be the active player for anything there. And the person who, when you're in the deployment phase, that finished deploying first is also going to be the active player during the deployment phase. And sometimes you're going to see friendly and enemy. So the friendly just means that that's going to be anything that's relating to you, your models, and everything on your side. And enemy is going to be everything referring to your opponent's side models and any of their abilities. Hi YouTube, this is Mike with Dark Wizard Gaming. Thanks so much for watching our How to Play 9th Age video series. Now if you did like the video, please use the like and subscribe feature below here and feel free to leave any comments. And now if you have questions about how the game works or any rules questions, I would strongly suggest you go to the 9th Age forum and actually post on there. They're going to have a full team and there's a community there to help you with any rules questions. If you do comment here, I will answer your questions, but it may take a week or 2 before I get back with you, whereas if you go to the 9th Age forums, you'll get answers right away. So enjoy your 9th Age gaming. Thanks.